Hello, Abby.
Hi, Carlos. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good.
I guess you're gonna get us started here.
Either I will or Bree will. I'm not. We'll see what she wants to do. But yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And I've just made you co-host, so you should be able to share any slides you have.
Yeah, let me you mind if we try that real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Because share. You can see this, right?
It says you've started screen. Yep. Yes. Yep. I can see the slides.
And if I go, is that a pretty good view? Because if I go to presentation mode, it kind of messes things up. Let me see. No, this. How about now? What do you see now?
I just see this, like the presentation slide.
But in presentation mode or in the edit mode, so to
In
speak?
presentation mode. Yeah, I can't
Okay.
see your notes or anything.
Okay, and if I do this, then you see the next slide?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. So that seems to work. Good.
Yeah.
1 sec. You're working mostly from home?
I'm in the office 2 or 3 days a week, and then
Oh.
I'm at home 2 or 3 days a week. Yeah, it's a good balance. I like it.
Yeah, that's good. And your son is doing well?
Yeah, actually, I have 2 sons now. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, they're doing
okay.
well.
Great, wonderful, wonderful.
I'm going to run out to get my water filled up. I'll be right back.
Sure. I'm going to do the same.
Alrighty, we'll give it another minute or two. We usually have people joining late, but
Everybody. Just wait a couple minutes as folks are logging on. It's very cold out today, so I don't know. Slower. There we go. So we're at 12:02. Before I introduce Carlos, I'm going to ask Abby if she has any announcements to make today.
I think the only one is just want to remind everybody that the Epic skating event is taking place, I think, early February. And so if you'd like to participate in that, we need to get your RSVP in by Monday. I think that's it for today.
Thank you, Abby. So everyone, it gives me great pleasure to introduce today Dr. Carlos Mendes de Leon. I know many of you know him or know of his work. He's a social epidemiologist with a primary interest in the major health problems and health disparities in later life. His work focuses on a broad array of social and psychological determinants that affect the development and progression of disability, cognitive decline, and other age-related health outcomes. Some specific areas of life course social conditions that he's been working on that affects, or some specific areas that he's been working in are around life course social conditions that affect physical and cognitive decline in later life. And some of the work that he's going to tell us about today around work-related experiences and post-retirement health trajectories. He also does work on health disparities related to African American and Arab American populations. And he's involved in many different collaborations, including some great collaborations in Lebanon and the Netherlands. So with that, Carlos, welcome.
Thank you, Bree. Thank you so much for your very nice introduction. And thank you for having me being part of this seminar. It's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to talk a little bit about this kind of work I've been doing over the past few years. I feel that this area is an important aspect of social epidemiology, but for some reasons, some of which I may touch upon, hasn't quite received the attention that I think it deserves, because I feel that there are very many really important questions in the area about work, retirement, and aging that remain to be explored, that remain to be answered. So I'm going to sort of talk about this in a seminar style. That means I'm going to talk a little bit about my own work in this area, but also other people's work as it relates to this general topic. And before I continue here, can you see my slides okay like this, or is it better if I go to presentation mode? I can do either one.
We can see them, but we definitely, we are seeing your slides on the side if you want to, if you don't want us to see those. It's your choice.
Yeah, it is easier to, it's easier, I think. You know what, let me try to go to presentation mode. That will take me a second.
No problem. Yeah, there's always a balance.
Well, it's kind of you need to do a few things to get
we're seeing your presenter mode right now. Oh.
Was it better the other way around?
No, this is it. You got it. Perfect.
Got it. All right, great. Thank you. So let's get going here. And so I think about this area of research along several questions, important questions, I think. First of all, is how long should we really be expected to work? We all know what the conventional, traditional retirement age is, but is that age of 65 as it used to be, is that still sort of sustainable as a retirement age, or should we be expected to work maybe longer since we are living longer? But if we are working longer, we can ask the question, how much longer without losing the opportunity for healthy aging? In other words, without losing the opportunity to have a healthy and productive life after you either slow down or stop working altogether in older ages? And will that postpone or slow down aging-related declines in health? And can we move that retirement age in fiscally responsible ways? I think that's also a really important question that has to do with Social Security and Medicare policy issues that I will not have the time to get into this afternoon. And of course, in everything we do and every question that we address in social epidemiology, we always want to have a keen perspective on promoting and maximizing health equity for all. So I'm going to talk, my talk is basically in 4 sections. I'm going to talk very briefly about work and active life expectancy. Then I'm going to discuss a little bit about the literature on retirement and health. That is, how does retirement, if we stop working, how does it affect our health and well-being? Then I'm going to review a little bit of the literature on how work-related experiences may be related to later life health trajectories, later life aging, in other words, and then conclude with some final thoughts if I get to it, because I tend to run over. But I'll try to finish by about 1/4 or 10 till 1. So first, a little bit about work life and life expectancy. We all know, of course, that we are in an era of population aging with greater life expectancy, not only at birth, but certainly also at age 65. We also live in an era with increasingly smaller dependency or support ratio, that is the number of middle-aged working adults in relation to the number of older adults in our communities and in our societies. And also, we live in an era where we have accomplished increasingly better health later in life, meaning that the functional and cognitive health and well-being of people aged, say, 65 or 70 is probably quite a bit better right now than in a previous generation, and 1 or 2 or 3 generations ago. All setting the stage for that question of like, till what age can we really work productively, successfully, and in a healthy way? So that gets to the topic of work or working life expectancy. Another related topic that I will not talk about is changes in pension retirement policies in the US and across the world effectively. So here's a slide about work-life expectancy. That is, what is the average number of years a person in a given cohort or at a given age will be expected to spend either working or actively looking for work during the remainder of his life. And you see the histograms on the left for males, for US men, and on the right for US women. Clearly, of course, the lighter blue bar on the left is the life expectancy, that obviously a number of years still to live will go down as we get older. They tend to be a little bit higher among women than in men because women have a greater life expectancy. So in the darker blue bar right next to it, you see the work life expectancy. That is obviously a little bit smaller than life expectancy. We generally do not work until we die, basically. And at age 20 for men, you see that's still 35 years. But obviously that number goes down as we age as well for men and for women. And then finally, we see the difference between life expectancy and work life expectancy. And the most noteworthy aspect here is twofold. First of all, as of like age 50, in terms of the remaining years of our life, we tend to have more life left not working than working. At least that's a scenario for men. For women, a slightly different scenario, that at each age, actually the number of years not working will be slightly higher in the early ages than the years working, and gradually that difference will increase over time. In other words, as of age 50, say for men, and age 40 or even 25, a greater proportion of our life will be spent not working rather than working. Here's another slide from this paper using HRS data. We see here what the work-life expectancy is in the dark blue line for men at the left, work-life expectancy is age 50. If you're 50 as a US male, you're expected to work another about 14 and a half years. For women, that is about 13 years on the right. And that is a proportion of the work-life expectancy of your remaining life. That is around 40% for men, as you see, and about, oops, I cannot see that because I think it's about 30% for women. The dips that you see here in 1998 to 2002 and 2008 and 11, especially for men, are related to the downturn, the economic downturn that we experienced in the US economy, which laid off a lot of older working adults, and so therefore had less working life expectancy left over. So this gives you hopefully a sense of what the number of working life we have at each age and what kind of proportion to our overall life expectancy that is. And this slide, which I will, from the NHAT study here, led by Vicki Friedman here at Michigan, shows you also the change, the increase in functional health, in overall health, if you will, between 1982 and 2011. The bottom line of this slide is essentially that we are in better functional health in 2011. We are meaning adults age 65 years and over, compared to the same age adults in 1982. The other point to take away from this slide is that this increase in better functional health is greater for men on the left than for women on the right. But the bottom line is we are in better functional health when we reach older age, say age 65, which is relevant to addressing the question of, can we work longer than age 65? Would we be capable in terms of our overall health of working perhaps a few more years or not? All right, so that was a quick sort of context of how to think about working, retirement, and aging. And now we'll turn to the topic of retirement and health, and specifically looking at some papers that investigated if retirement is associated with changes in health itself. Is retirement good for your health, yes or no? We may think that perhaps retirement is good for your health because you no longer have the pressures, all the stresses from work, and so therefore you can perhaps recover a little bit from your work life and attain better physical and mental health, if you will. Here are some older data from the civil servant study in Great Britain. What you see here is the change in mental functioning in the top part of this graph, and physical functioning in the bottom part. And I redlined, I should be very careful using that word. I put a red line box, if you will, around the sort of the primary findings of this study. And you see the data split up by grade of employment, grade 1 being high, grade 2 medium, and grade 3 low. These are all civil servants in the UK. And you see that for the grade 1 civil servants, there appears to be an improvement in mental health functioning following retirement relative to those of the same age that continue to work. That improvement is a little bit lower, but also visible for those in the medium grade of civil servant employees, and but much smaller and not significant among the lower grade civil servants in the UK. For physical functioning, you don't see much of a benefit, if you will, from retirement. In fact, there is a little bit of a decline in physical functioning for the high and medium grade employees, civil servant employees. and a significantly decline in physical functioning for grade 3 civil servant employees. So overall, maybe some benefit in terms of mental health functioning following your retirement, especially for the higher grade employees, not so much in physical functioning. Well, there are some important questions related to changes in health from before to after retirement that are sometimes difficult to disentangle, and I will get into that here in the next few slides. Here's another study looking, I think this is HRS data, comparing mortality risk for early retirees on the right and late retirees on the left. And the bottom line is the reference group, by the way, being the ones who retire at sort of the expected age, being between, say, about 63 and 67. You see that early retirees have a higher mortality risk, significantly higher mortality risk, and late retirees have, in fact, a lower mortality risk, suggesting that it might be beneficial for your health to keep working past your expected retirement risk age. And the question is that really true? Or not? And I will get to that in a couple of slides. One more finding here of whether retirement is good for your health. It appears to be related to an increased risk of cardiovascular disease within the first year of retirement. So for those of us among us who are maybe close to retirement age, which may be just me, we need to be careful to consider that first year after retirement, since we may have a slightly elevated risk of cardiovascular disease, which might be well explained, if you will, by just thinking about the couch potato effect, that once you retire, you slump down, you're not doing much of anything, and that may contribute to an elevated cardiovascular disease risk. I think that's one plausible scenario, perhaps not the only plausible scenario here, but that's one thing to consider when you think about the health effects of retirement, that there may be a downturn in overall activity patterns that may be, it may have an adverse effect on your health. All right, so now I'm going to turn to a couple of papers that I think are really interesting. Here's the first one, using data from the SHARE studies in Europe. This is sort of an health and retirement study model that has been applied to 27, 28 different countries in Europe over the years since the early 2000s. And what these investigators did is to try to disentangle the effect from retirement on health from the effect of having poor health prior to retirement, because the concern is, well, you retire early. Why? You retire early maybe because you're in poor health. So if you look at health changes from before to after retirement, what you may be seeing is just a continuation of your poor health that led to retirement in the first place. And in order to do so, what these investigators did is use an instrumental variable approach. They could do this in all these European countries because they all had different retirement policies, if you will, Social Security benefit policies. And they can use that as an instrument to disentangle the effect of poor health prior to retirement on health changes after retirement. And when you compare, for example, if you look at the two columns under bad health, you see an ordinary linear regression model there first, fitted for the different retirement ages, 57 to 59, that would be early retirement, 60 to 64, maybe regular retirement. For many European countries, that would be a regular retirement age, and then 65 to 69 being a later retirement. And bad health is an outcome that higher scores means more bad health. This is just a self-rated health question, by the way. And you see that if you do an ordinary linear regression with the various control variables, that would indicate that retirement early and regular time relative to later time would be associated with more bad health, would be bad for your health. However, if you use that instrumental variable approach, and now you see the red box there under IV, you see that the effects are in fact the reverse, at least for the regular retirement age, older adults, and the later retirement age, if you will. Now we have a negative coefficient that suggests that retirement, in fact, is associated with better self-rated health. Okay. They did the same analysis for health index, which is just a summary index of all sorts of health symptoms and conditions, and found essentially the same pattern of results as you see on the right side. So that does suggest that there is a connection between having poor health and retiring early. There is a degree of endogeneity to it, to say it in sociological terms. Here's another example from US data, using, again, an instrumental variable approach, this time using data from different cohorts of people, where slowly the Social Security Administration has slowly increased the age at which you attain full Social Security benefits in the last, whatever, 25 or 30 years, I believe. And here you see on the left-hand side the changes in self-reported physical health, again, just a self-rated health question, comparing the recently retired to those continuing in the labor force. And if you look at the top left box, the black line is the recently retired. And you see the predicted value for self-rated health is actually at around age 67. Meaning that the ones who retire at age 67 seem to report the best self-rated health immediately following retirement. It is lower if you retire early, but if you retire after age 65, it tends to drop down again a little bit. That is what that curvilinear line suggests there. The straight line, the lighter gray straight line, is the line for self-rated health for those who continue in the labor force. And you see there is a downward slope to it, since as we get older, our overall health may decline. And so on average, we may report lower self-rated health as we age. The box on the bottom left is the difference between the two. You see there are not really, well, there's a really significant difference on the left side for those who retire really early between the ages 55 and 60. They clearly have a poor self-rated health. On the right-hand side, the same graph, the same method, now for emotional health based on the CESD. And here the pattern is a little bit different in the sense that what we see there in the bottom right is that there is a significant benefit in terms of emotional health if we retire a little bit later in life, that is past the age of 65. Whereas if we retire before the age of 60, on the bottom left there, you see a significant adverse effect on emotional health. So these are two, I think, very good examples of research trying to disentangle the effects of poor health on retirement while investigating the retirement effects on health itself. I'm going to skip on this for the sake of time. Another instrumental variable approach here is by Rowetter and Bob Willis, looking at changes in cognitive functioning and using this instrumental variable approach. This was also in the shared data, if I recall this correctly. They show a significant negative effect on cognition scores. So retirement, suggesting that retirement may lead to some cognitive decline right after retirement. All right. Now, one paper I did with my Dutch colleagues, Sanne van Zon, who spent some time with us in CSAF back in, when was it, 2014 or 15, something like that. We did an analysis of functional health declines before and after retirement using the health and retirement study. I hope if I say health and retirement study data, or HRS for short, that many, if not all of you, are at least somewhat familiar with this data set and this data. But please, if you'd like for me to explain a little bit what the study is about, then I'll be happy to say a little bit more about this landmark study that is conducted out of ISR in Michigan. So please speak up. I'm not sure that I can see the chat, so it would be helpful if you just speak up if you have a question about any of this. Thank you. All right. So we wanted to describe the patterns of pre and post-retirement changes in functional health, and we also looked at socioeconomic differences in these patterns. And for the sake of this seminar, we'll have to skip that part of it. But let's look at this analysis where, as I said, we used data from HRS over a number of different ways from 1992 to 2012. We restricted it to adults aged 51 to 70 and excluded people who were already retired. And we looked basically at changes in two measures of functional health: mobility limitations, which is a summary measure of 5 items, and limitations in large muscle functions, which is a summary of 4 items. And essentially, in a longitudinal GE model, this is what we found. And I'll walk you through this table quickly and then show you sort of the graphical display of these results. But the results indicate that mobility limitations tend to increase in the years before retirement, leading up to retirement, by an average of 0.048 on this scale per year. And then if I go down that column, that increase in mobility limitations continues after retirement, albeit at a somewhat smaller degree. But that's what you would expect. As people age, they develop mobility limitations over time. And then going down to the bottom 2 rows of this for mobility limitations, you see that there is a negative interaction between age at retirement and time before retirement. Meaning that these mobility limitations, they increase, but increase less so the later you retire. That's essentially what you see in that interaction effect. And the last coefficient there at the bottom, 0.003, indicates that but once you retire, the pace at which these mobility limitations develop increases. Okay, that's what these mean, and we'll look at a graph in just a second. We see somewhat the same pattern in terms of the overall coefficients on the right-hand side for our second dependent variable, large muscle limitations. So if you put this together, you get graphs like this, and I hope that you see it well enough there on your screen to follow up. We have 3 lines for 3 different retirement ages at 57, 62, and 67. And essentially what you see is that people who retire early, the lighter gray bar, they have a greater pace of increase in both mobility functions and large muscle functioning functions prior to retirement. That part of the slope is steeper for those who retire at age 57. It's a little bit less steep for those that retire at age 62, and it is the slowest increase for those that retire at age 67. Okay. However, after retirement, that picture reverses. Now the ones who retire late accelerate their increase in mobility functions, and the acceleration is much less so for those who retire earlier. In other words, the way I usually try to sort of give an overall inference and interpretation of this is it's not so much age that determines when you retire, but it's your health that determines when you retire. And I say this because you see, in terms of particularly mobility limitations, the point of mobility limitations, the number of limitations is virtually the same for those that retire early at age 57 and that retire late at 67. However, if you do retire late, great, but then your mobility limitations, your overall physical health, if you will, starts picking up the pace of aging again, and you develop these limitations at a greater rate. All right, so that is an overall sort of quick overview of some of the literature on the health effects of retirement, looking primarily at pre to post-retirement changes in health. Now we turn to the third topic, and that's the topic of work and aging, meaning how do our work-related experiences and exposures affect our late life health, essentially, affect how we age, how well we age, what is the impact of these work-related experiences on our physical health later in life, our cognitive health and later in life, and if you will, our mental health and overall quality of life as well. And so we can ask this question in terms of different types of work-related experiences, right? How would working in an office for most of your life affect your late life health, or being in a profession like plumbing or electrician or things like that affect our late life health, or being a teacher in front of a classroom for most of your life? These are the kind of questions I think are important to ask, and we actually have very little information on this overall topic. And what part of the problem in this research is, how do we characterize our work life? How do we characterize work experiences and exposures? And there are a number of different ways we can think about this. Going over this slide from the top left, clearly we can think about work stress, work-related stress that we all experience to some degree or another. Excuse me. We can think about work in terms of the occupational tasks and demands that are imposed on us. We can also think about the social environment of work, the social support we might receive, the social engagement we may experience as part of our work. We can also characterize work in terms of the prestige of our occupation. That is an old line of sociological research that try to assign prestige scores to different occupations that have different degrees of prestige in a particular cultural societal setting, if you will, and that changes over time. And then finally, we can think about work also in terms of employment trajectories, which is also a really interesting perspective, if you will, given that these employment trajectories have changed quite a bit from 1 or 2 generations ago, where many people, joined and engage on an employment trajectory and stayed there for most of their occupational life. I feel in newer generations that is shifting. People shift jobs, don't stay with the same company for 30, 40, 50 years anymore, but shift companies and change completely the kind of work that they're doing. So that's one part of employment trajectories. Other parts are, family leaves and taking absences from work for family purposes. We may also have episodes of unemployment or of disability and sick leave. And we can ask questions about how these different trajectories affect our late life health outcomes. All right. I would like to just show a couple of things about work stress and late life, the way we have approached this idea in the general literature. There are 2 older models to think about work life, 2 European models that have been used in the European literature way more than in the American literature or the North American literature. And that's the Karasek model and Zegras model. And essentially in the Karasek model, try to characterize jobs in terms of job demands, how demanding a job was versus job decision control, as you see on the left axis, if you will, of that little graph on the right top here. And if you make a 2x2 table of job demands and job decision control, you see the 4 different combinations of a passive job, a low strain job, a high strain job, and an active job. All right, and people have used this in literature, as I will show in a second, to see if that's related to working in these kind of conditions, related to health outcomes later in life. The other model is the Zegers model that characterized work more in terms of job effort and reward, and the balance or imbalance between those two. Higher effort, lower reward is obviously not the balance that you want. That is an imbalance. In an ideal setting, you would not mind have high effort if it's also met with high rewards in terms of job security, promotion prospects, and et cetera, et cetera. All right. So some work in this area, this paper by Li-Ming Dong, that used to be a valued member of CSAF. She used data from the epidemiologic catchment area studies in Baltimore, which was a big survey of psychiatric health, psychiatric and mental health. And essentially, to summarize her findings here is she looked at the association between job strain and cognitive change over time, and did find a little bit of evidence for an association between the high strain job as defined by this Karasek model, and a more decline in cognition, so more negative cognitive change, more decline in cognition. As I said, if you look at that first red box there. And that is overall cognitive performance. She and her colleagues also looked at specific cognitive function in terms of verbal memory, and you see again some evidence for a association between a high strain job and more cognitive decline in this cohort. There are also some patterns that are similar for the active job and the passive job relative to the low strain job. The low strain job being, for your information, in case you want to go that direction, is low demands and high control, something we all would like to see in our job, I think. So Li-Ming's work was more general in terms of work experiences and cognitive aging, if you will, cognitive decline over time. This is a paper by Ross Andel, who looks more at the effect of job control, again, from that Karasek model on post-retirement change. So he looked not just at, in this case, again, a cognitive functioning, a memory test, not just that change over time as you age, but also how that change differs between the pre and post-retirement period of your life. And that is on the graph on your right-hand side. Essentially, the findings suggest a minor effect of better job control on less cognitive decline post-retirement. That dashed line that goes down just like the straight line with the log joe control, but after retirement, that 0 point on the x-axis in that graph, the decline slows down a little bit, as you see, so that the difference with the low job control, cognitive functioning, the memory functioning becomes a little bit bigger over time.
Can I ask a question?
Please, yes, thank you.
I'm a little bit confused about the definition of job control. Can you give a little bit description of this concept?
Yes, so that comes from this Karasek model here. Thank you for your question. That's a great question. I'm sorry I didn't go into the details of what kind of criteria Karasek first and then others after him used to define job decision control and job demands. And frankly, I don't have the criteria in my head off the top of my head here either. But you see, it is related to your decision-making abilities. That means basically how much control do you have of the pace of your working, of the content of what you do every day at work, those kind of issues, right? Some
Okay.
workers, come to work and are basically told what they need to do, or there's a certain pace to it, that you have no control over whatsoever. And other people have jobs where they have a fair degree of control. You go to work and certainly us researchers and academics have a fair degree of control over basically what we do every day and how we provide substance to our jobs. And we also control the pace of our job to some degree as well, to a high degree, I would say.
Okay.
Does that make sense if I
Yes.
explain? Great.
So in conclusion, is there some positions like academia, we have high job control?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. I would consider those high job control, but sort of depending on what kind of academic setting you have, you may also have high job demands. I think most
Yes.
of my colleagues would argue that the demands on our job are pretty high in academia.
So there will be high strain job there.
They would be high strain
Okay.
jobs in that sense. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
They would be called active.
Okay,
Active means high demands, but also high control.
okay.
High strain is low control and high demands. That would
Okay.
be sort of the worst possible combination, if you will. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm going to skip this because I see that we are already almost at 45 past the hour. I did some work with another doctoral student in sociology, Lucy Kalasova, some years back, where we looked at these kind of psychosocial work conditions according to the Karasek and Seacrest models and changes in frailty. We did that in the SHARE data, so this European consortium of aging studies, if you will. And we basically, these are the results. We found that a job characterized by high effort or high demands, if you will, were associated with greater increases in frailty from pre to post-retirement, and the same for lower reward type of jobs. All right. So I wanted to sort of end with the last couple of things in relation to work demands and late life health, and that is to look at occupational tasks and demands. And the idea here is that, the more cognitively stimulating our jobs are during our lifetime, perhaps that gives us an advantage when we age in terms of preventing or at least slowing down cognitive decline. Okay, sort of from this cognitive reserve, this use it or lose it perspective, as it used to be called in very simplistic term. Nowadays, again, we refer to it maybe as cognitive reserve. If we have jobs that are cognitively stimulating or complex or demanding, then perhaps we maintain and or build up this cognitive reserve that will benefit us later in life to postpone the changes that normally occur during aging in terms of our cognition. And so here's one example of a paper that was published just a couple of years ago in the Gerontologist, looking at the job complexity and post-retirement cognitive age change. This is a really good paper using HRS data and linking HRS data with the ONNET database. I have another example from our own work in following this graph, but essentially this group of investigators looked at cognitive change post-retirement in people who worked in low complexity jobs on the left to moderate to high. And what we see is that the cognitive change in the low complexity jobs is greater than in the moderate and in the high job complexity, high complexity jobs, I should say. But still, there's cognitive change for most of these groups, with the possible exception for those who have had a high complexity job on the right, the light green on the right-hand side, and who then, after retirement, return to work. They seem to be best, they seem to have the most cognitive reserve, if you will. They seem to change the least. They in fact increased a little bit in cognitive functioning, as you see in that coefficient of 0.43 there. All other groups, whether they continue to work full-time, partially retired, fully retired, seem to decline for the most part. All right. I had a great pleasure of working on this paper with my former doctoral student, Lindsay Poole, on also in a similar type topic in a different data set, the Chicago Health and Aging Project, looking at occupational cognitive requirements and late life cognitive aging in this database. For the sake of time, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly. The idea is the same. What I want to share with you is this ONAD database where you can link occupations as reported by your participants in the study, if they are classified, tabulated, if enumerated, if you will, according to the standard occupational classification or SOC. You can actually link each occupational status with job exposures using this ONAD database that is put out by the Department of Labor. And it has a number of different scales, I believe 7 or 8 or 9 different scales, one of them cognitive requirements with 10 items that you see listed here. It is a heck of a job to make that linkage, which Lindsay did in a fantastic way. But you need to first code all the different occupations that people report. That's an incredible work. I have no idea how they did it in HRS, but apparently they were able to. We were able to do it in this database, which was still 6,000 to 7,000 people. Anyway, we looked at some longitudinal linear mixed models. I'm going to skip on this, and I'm just going to show you the results for the sake of time. We found some significant association. It wasn't particularly strong, but it was significant, as you see here. The bottom line, that's the coefficient we are interested in interpreting here, and that is that if you worked during your lifetime in a job with greater occupational cognitive requirement, say the 90th percentile, your cognitive decline in later life tends to be a little bit slower than if you worked in a job with much lower occupational cognitive requirements. The blue line, the 10th percentile on this scale of cognitive requirements, which again, we derive from the ONAD database. So some suggestion here that being engaged in a job that has more cognitive demands may give you at least a little bit of protection against cognitive decline later in life. We also looked at the interaction with ApoE4, a well-established genetic risk factor for aging. And I wanted to show this interaction, which by now was a triple interaction, was not significant. But we do see that that the effect of having an ApoE4 plus gene, that is the blue line, is somewhat more muted, which is the risk factor. If you have a allele that is E4 on this ApoE gene, then you're at higher risk of developing cognitive decline later in life, well established. But if you have a job with higher occupational cognitive requirements, that effect is somewhat more muted than when you have been working in a job with far lower occupational cognitive requirements, which is the slide on the right, the graph on the right-hand side. But again, I should be careful, the p-value was not significant, but it is a triple interaction effect, so not a lot of power. All right, I do some current work with another doctoral student from psychology, and I will not be presenting the results here, although I will give you the bottom line. She, the student from psychology, and I were really interested, well, you know, retirement is an important transition in people's life, and it may be an opportunity to adopt more healthy lifestyles that may be good for healthy aging, that may promote healthy aging. And one of the things you could do is, increasing your social engagement, since you might have time for it. And is this helpful in averting or slowing down cognitive decline? And we use the HRS data combined with the CAMS data that are sent out to half of the HRS sample a year later after HRS survey. The CAMS data is the consumption activities mail survey data that has much more detailed information on social activities, if you will. And they include whether or not you return to work after retirement, social activities in person, including in-person visits, informal caregiving, volunteer work, and participation in entertaining activities such as concerts, movies, etc. Bottom line is we found nothing. Much to my chagrin, we found, unfortunately, very little to suggest that either having high levels of social engagement immediately following retirement, or an increase from pre to post retirement had a clear benefit on cognitive aging, which was very disappointing. I have to admit, very disappointing. Anyway, let me finish with some final thoughts here. There seems to be a small mental health benefit immediately after the retirement transition. I think that's what the general literature seems to indicate. Workers in better health are more likely to retire at older ages, but this benefit may be lost soon thereafter. Work-related cognitive demands may have a small beneficial effect on cognitive aging. It is small, but every small effect on cognitive reserve is worth pursuing. And I also think we can think more about this retirement transition, what kind of opportunities it may offer to figure out the lifestyle changes that may actually promote healthy aging, promote better health outcomes in late life. And obviously, we all think of physical activity and maybe better dietary patterns as potentially having a positive effect, but maybe we can also think of other types of policies or interventions that may promote better health outcomes in life and also provide more health equity in later life as well. And with that, thank you. I will look at I see there's one chat. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's just saying the graph is very good for visualizing and tell the conclusion immediately.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. So we have a few minutes left, so open to any questions or discussion.
I have a quick question. Hi, Carlos. Nice to see you.
Hi, Zoe.
Thank you for this great presentation. I was happy to see the merging with the ONET data, because it seemed like that's a great resource that you can tap into. And I was wondering if any work has been done with physical exposures and maybe even interaction of physical with some of the more mental and pressure and strain for later cognitive life. Yeah, I mean, and that would be mostly for, I guess, more blue collar workers who are having chemical or physical types of exposures.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. That's a great question, and absolutely. Has anything been done? Not that I'm aware of. I will say that some of this literature appears in very different journals, right? The use of ONET databases probably there's probably some more literature in sort of labor journals, economic journals than in our social epi or general epi or gerontology journals. But your question is right on. I think there are so many important and good questions there that are still wide open. And basically what we need is a merging of these labor and economic worlds with the gerontology, social epidemiology worlds, and come together and bring these resources together to answer these important questions. To me, important question is, not only how long can we work and do so without it adversely affecting our late life health, but does that relationship vary by occupational exposure or occupational status, right?
Right.
We can say, like, I can do my academic or office job until I'm late 60s or early 70s, like many of us do. But would we want to expect the same for someone who works in physically demanding jobs, who works in construction or something like that? Probably not, but we need to find out. We need to get the data to answer those kind of questions.
Thank you. And I was going to just say, for anybody who does want to standardize occupation titles, there is now a really great, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, has automated the process using like a machine learning system. So you literally can upload an Excel document with job titles and get a pretty good match to a classification. So don't be too afraid, but it is a little, there's a learning curve. So thank you.
Thank you, Zoe, and perhaps I may follow up with you on that at some point to learn more about this approach by NIOSH. I might be very interested in learning more about it. So thank you.
I asked
Bree.
a couple.
Okay, go ahead, please, Jessica.
Sorry, I've got my kiddo home, so I apologize if he's loud. We just had a daycare closure. So I can relate to stress at different ways with the day. So I just had a couple of questions, and again, I apologize if I missed something. But that slide that you showed with the, I think was it cognitive health outcomes for the return to work group? Did the authors provide any ideas about why that group that returned to work might be associated with positive health outcomes?
I believe you mean
It was
this slide. This slide, Jessica?
Yeah, that green group, the retire and then work to. Any ideas that they provided or insights that you have about why we might see that higher cognitive performance?
Well, I mean, the simplistic explanation, it's been a while since I read that paper, so I don't know what the author, I'm not speaking for the authors. Let me put it this way. My sort of speculation here, if you will, would be twofold. One is, well, if you retire, but then return to work, you continue to be, particularly because you're in this high complexity job, meaning usually more of an office type job, which has more cognitive demands to begin with prior to retirement. You engage in similar type jobs after you return to work. So in other words, you keep using your brains actively during the day, right? It's the use it and use it or lose it kind of simplistic mechanism. The more cautious speculation here is to carefully look for unmeasured residual confounding, right? Who are these people who have high complexity jobs, then retire and then return to work? Who are they? Is it work, or is it some other aspect of their either health or status, wealth, whatever it is, that in fact is driving this association. So I think we need to be very careful to make sure that there's not some unmeasured confounding going on here.
Yeah, because it's interesting. It's so different from partially retire, which could also kind of keep on that cognitive reserve hypothesis idea, but there's that difference there. It's just neat to see. I have another question, but I can, if anyone else has one, I'll happy to ask it later.
I thought there was Bree. Did you have a question? What I saw here, and
yeah, I mean, I agree with Jessica's question. I think it's a great thing. I mean, maybe you could just close this out with her kind of a couple of reflections on her other question on your thoughts on COVID and how that might be shaping what we observe here. I've certainly seen some data showing, or not, that a big chunk of older adults just left the labor force for fear of safety. during, the pandemic, and like whether they return or not, I guess is a question, but then, yeah, I don't know, just your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Bree. And maybe it also speaks to Whitey's question about voluntary and involuntary retirement. Absolutely, and those are also very important and relevant questions right now. And the sort of, I don't know what the answer is there, and I think we need to sort of continue to follow patterns of post-retirement health and functioning in the generation that is retiring during COVID, either voluntarily or involuntarily, either early or not early, right? We need to make those kind of comparisons. The question about voluntary versus involuntary retirement is a good one, is a difficult one. I'm not sure that I've seen much in the literature on this quite yet, Whitey, so I'm not sure that I know what the answer is. I suspect, though, that involuntary retirement, again, is sort of potentially a little endogenous with poor health as well. You need to be very careful to disentangle poor health from involuntary retirement. But I could be wrong on this, but that's what I suspect. And in terms of COVID, yeah. I mean, is that retirement during COVID and taking early retirement during COVID, does that have an effect in and of itself, apart from just early retirement in general? I don't know, Bree. I mean, it's a good question. It'll be also challenging to figure out, because, you're not only retiring early, potentially early from work, you're also living in a post-retirement world where you can't do much, right? Where things are very restricted, and many people have an issue with retirement to begin with, right? To find some meaningful things to do during the day. That is a transition that people need some time to figure that out. What am I going to do? Particularly since we still live so long after retirement, which is what I started off with. But now, if you have this empty day, if you will, I'm exaggerating with this. I hope it's not empty, but people experience a certain emptiness or a void of things to do. And if you're restricted in opportunities, make that things worse. And I wouldn't be surprised if it does. Thank you. You probably want to close out here, since we have to leave the office.
Lots of great questions. So again, please join me in thanking Carlos for this fantastic talk. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, everybody. Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye, everyone.